Right, for some analysis now on that ruling by the Supreme Court, we're joined by political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng. Asanda, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Is this the end of the road? Is this the dead end for the ANC now? I mean, if you go to the Concord Constitutional Judge, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, has already articulated on his views on the cadre deployment policy, saying it's unconstitutional and illegal. So will it help them at all to take this matter further?
I think the ANC should actually take this to the Constitutional Court, because I think there's some questions that still need to be answered. And so I do agree that within the ANC, the cadre deployment policy has been abused and has been used to sometimes put people in place who are not the most qualified or who are not the best candidates for the job. And this has been at the detriment of service delivery and to the detriment of South Africans through corruption and other scandals that have come through because, you know, the people who were put in place were not the best people for the job. But I think that, you know, we do need to have a conversation about what is it that people vote for, and what are the expectations that people have when they vote for a political party, a specific political party into power. People vote for a political party because they want to have they wanted to have power, and they wanted to be able to have their most senior leaders in decision-making spaces, and they wanted to have their specific people in places where they can influence and ensure that the policies of that particular political party are executed. And so there's a very thin line and that needs to be kind of engaged with, and there is nuance that needs to come to the conversation, because the very DA that is taking this to court and is jumping around and pretending as if they don't implement the same policy, also implements the policy. I mean, just before this interview, I kind of decided to go dig up and try and find an example of a situation where the DA took a former member of parliament and put him in place in a government agency. So for an example of that is Tim Harris, who's now the chair of the board of tourism. He started out as a member of the Democratic Alliance. He was moved to Westgrow, which is the economic and tourism arm of the Western Cape government. And he was put in place as a cadre deployee in that position, with Patricia de Lille, the then mayor, saying they were putting him in place to make sure that as the city was developing its policies based on DA policies, that he would be ensuring that the economic development of the province is going to be aligned with this. And so this is not, the cadre deployment is not something that's, you know, that's only implemented by the ANC. It's implemented by all political parties. It is literally the bread and butter of political systems. And so the question is more around, has the ANC abused this particular issue, this particular policy, and what are the implications, or what have been the implications for South Africa? The very reason, you know, that you have the president being the one that appoints the prime minister, that appoints the judges and other powerful people, is precisely because the business of government is the business of patronage, and the business of government is about ensuring that the political party that wins is a political party that has influence across all spheres of government and beyond.
So would you say the ANC is finding itself in this predicament because maybe not of the cadre deployment policy itself, because as you put it, all political parties in the world over actually do that, but they are in this position for a poorly implemented cadre deployment policy?
Yes, I think they are in this position because they have members who abuse the policy, and the policy was not implemented in a sense of ensuring that the best candidate gets the job, you know, together with that candidate's ability to engage with the political party and ensure that the policies of the political party are implemented. But I'm surprised personally that the ANC hasn't filed a countersuit, because if I was them, I would be filing a countersuit with the DA, because they also need to come out and tell us, you know, and tell us how they put their people in power. Because I can tell you that I know people who are in the Western Cape government, particularly black people, who have reached the glass ceiling and will never be or receive any position that is higher because they are not members of the Democratic Alliance. And this is kind of one of those open secrets. And so I'm kind of astounded by the hypocrisy of the DA. While I think it's important that the ANC is held accountable and is challenged on this issue and its abuse of this policy, I also think we need to equally call out the DA for its hypocrisy in taking the ANC all the way to court for something that they do and something that they implement and something that they also abuse, to be quite honest. Because even if you look at, for instance, the leadership of the Democratic Alliance itself, is John Steenhuisen really the best candidate? Was he appointed on meritocracy with his matric? Is that the best? Is he the best person that the DA can have? And if the DA is indeed a political party that thrives on meritocracy, then why isn't somebody who's highly qualified and is a doctor, for Christ's sake, like Mpho, in leadership? She eventually had to resign because they were making her a backbencher and putting her on the back burner after using and abusing her, and ensuring that, her blackness was used to get votes in Gauteng. Yeah. So these are the questions that we need to be asking, and not just looking purely at whether the ANC deserves to be called out for this issue or not, which I think it does. Yeah. But the DA also needs to be equally called out for its hypocrisy and its misleading the nation and pretending as if they are innocent when they themselves are also equally guilty of the same abuse.
But would, as a public, maybe want to know to an extent the degree in which there is an unhealthy space? I mean, we already know, but I suppose these records will confirm that there is an unhealthy space between party and state in terms of how they interfere with particular appointments at departments.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem of the ANC in particular has always been that it has increasingly, so all governments, all political parties work on patronage. That's a given of the political system of democracy, unfortunately. But the ANC has been particularly stellar at, this kind of blurring of the lines between party and state to a point where it becomes impossible to hold its people accountable because they always have the political party as the place, behind which they hide. And this is why, there were all these calls for changing the electoral system such that independent candidates can be voted for, such that, people can be held accountable, because people were beginning to feel like you can have whatever opinion you want to have about an ANC person, but until the ANC has decided that this person actually no longer deserves to be in power for their own internal reasons, that person will continue to be in power regardless of what the community they are supposed to serve says or thinks about them. And in fact, you'll remember that after the local elections, there were a lot of communities that even complained to say, we put forward these names and the ANC actually overrode our desires and put forward their own names. And the factionalism of the ANC doesn't help things at all, because now not only do you have cadre deployment where, people are put in place supposedly to implement the policies of the ANC, you also then have this power mongering between the different factions, where the different factions then use these positions to be able to fight each other and fight for power, which of course leads to the South African, the ordinary South African being the worst, the most affected, and service delivery being affected, and of course the corruption that we saw at the level of the Zondo Commission.
Asanda, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. Political analyst there, Asanda Ngoasheng, on that latest outcome from the Supreme Court of Appeals on the cadre deployment, records that need to now be handed over, I believe, in the next 5 days. Well, we'll see what decision the ANC is going to take on that. In a moment, what is behind the water shortage crisis in the city of Tshwane? The city says it's a technical problem. At Rand Water is saying it's the city overusing its allocated limit of water. Well, the department at national level has intervened to try and come up with a solution. They'll tell us in a moment what the challenge is there in the city of Tshwane. Deputy Minister David Mahlobo standing by to talk to us next. Dear,
Hey, leadership, how are you?
Are you well?
No, I'm surviving.
No, great stuff, great stuff. Good to hear
And
you.
I hope you are doing well. The summer has started.
Yeah, no, started. It's becoming warmer. We're doing well. Thank you very much.
No, it's very warm now.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Right, back live tonight, here on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Redwater and the city of Tshwane are at war. It's a war of words that have been exchanged publicly as the taps are remaining dry in some parts of Pretoria East. The water utility says the municipality's excessive consumption is to blame, while Tshwane says supply is actually insufficient. Here to help us unpack this, we're joined by the Deputy Minister of Water and Sanitation, David Mahlobo. DM, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you very much, Tshwane, to all your viewers across the length of breadth of our land and beyond.
Before we get into the conversation for you to explain to us what's happening, let's watch what the exchange has been so far between the city and the Department of, Redwater. All right, we don't seem to have it. It's offline at the moment. Nonetheless, DM, let's try and just capture for us. What is at the heart of the current water challenges affecting the city of Tshwane? One, you have the city saying it's a technical problem on the supply side at Redwater. Redwater saying, no. Tshwane has exceeded its water consumption limits. Hence, we are seeing the kind of challenges we are seeing in Pretoria East.
Thank you very much, Thabo. As a Ministry of Water and Sanitation, we've intervened in the public space between the city of Tshwane, which is a water service authority with its water service provider, the Redwater. These public space are not in the interest of the citizens of Tshwane that requires access to water, including the benefits of that access to water, whether for environmental, social, and economical. Yesterday, the minister convened a meeting with Redwater, the city of Tshwane, and the Minister of Water and Sanitation, and directed that the public space must stop. And our focus must to ensure that water is restored in communities that have been having challenges of water over the last few days, including some of the areas where some of us are staying. And I was directed to ultimately make a follow-up with His Worship, the Mayor of Tshwane, Councillor Brink, and the MMC Fosi, the Chairperson of Redwater, Mr. Nyokolo, and the entire leadership of Redwater that were there. We've agreed that one of the biggest problems that we have is the lack of good communication and coordination between the two institutions. Because management of water from bulk to tap, it must be managed as a holistic system from end to end. And this has not been happening. Secondly, there are challenges, as we know, in Gauteng, that the water demand is actually is above the available yield. That's why last week, if you remember, Thabo, the Minister of Water working with Rand Water were able to bring additional 150 megaliters per day into the water system for Gauteng, for Mpumalanga, Northwest, and some parts of Free State. And in the main, one of the problems when we engaged with this municipality and Rand Water yesterday, we agreed that firstly, there are norms and standards when it comes to management of water in the system from the command reservoirs. Some of the problems we have, the command reservoirs which are for storage of water in some of these areas, the norm, it must be between 60 and 70 something percentage. And sometimes when water is allowed to beyond below that particular number, it will have an impact in terms of the pressure, especially in the high-lying areas. And we agreed that the municipality and Rand Water, they must share the information in their telemetry system so that they don't have a problem where they go beyond the levels where the reservoirs, whether we are using gravitational force, whether we are pumping, certain areas will have no water. Secondly, there's an issue of load shedding and how they manage their water balance from time to time and the issues of the water usage in cooperation with the water users in the entire city of Tshwane, it must be corrected. There are issues that indeed now were at a summer season. Rand Water had convened a meeting of all municipalities in Gauteng to agree on a water management plan on how to manage during El Nino, but at the very same time, the consumer education and the responsibilities of municipalities. Right. That meeting between the city of Tshwane and Rand Water never took place so that they can be able to agree about the numbers, whether to increase or to reduce the issues of the availability of water. Right. That's what they've been fighting for in the main. Right. But now we've agreed that they are going to collaborate, they are going to work together. Then there is a need to implement water conservation and demand management from the systems management point of view, ensuring that there are no leakages in the system. When there are leaks, those leaks they are being managed. But also the behavior of citizens of Tshwane and elsewhere, they must be able to coordinate that at this particular point that we know that the usage is beyond the world average of 210 of 175, and the South African average is 275, and in Gauteng we're running at 300 liters per capita per day by users of our people. Those are some of the things that we've agreed that they must focus on. But going forward in a week or two, we are going to meet with all municipalities in Gauteng. Right. They must now respond whether their infrastructure is so adequate in such a way that the additional water that is being given into the system, they will be able to use that water, they will be able to store it, they will be able to give people proper billings, and that water is not going to go to the ground on the basis of water leaks or any illegal connections.
One could be very confused here and say we come from a summer season where we saw what we classify as an abundance of rain in the Gauteng province. Yet you're saying the overarching challenge here is that there is an acute water shortage. How do the two align? What would be the context of that historical acute water shortage?
We have to understand that we have been very fortunate that even during the winter season, very good rainfall that we have received, above the normal rainfall that we normally receive as a country. But it doesn't change, Thabo, from the fact that we remain a water-scarce country. There will be certain parts of the country where it rains, the other parts of the country is normally dry. The fact of the matter that water is coming into the dams, it does not necessarily mean that that water becomes available. because there must be an investment in bulk infrastructure. The bulk infrastructure, like your dams, your weirs, your water treatment plants, including the reservoirs that will be able to store this water, including the bulk pipelines of thousands of kilometers, so that you can be able to do that. As a country, in as much as we have done a lot of investment, we must appreciate that there's still a backlog when it comes to infrastructure, bulk infrastructure development. That's why we welcome the